afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge. My name is Jenna Labor, and I will be your host as we explore the dynamic world of Don Keenan's trial philosophy, the cutting edge. Those of you joining us live this afternoon have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with our speaker. If you have a question, please type it into the comments section below, and we will be sure to address it. Episodes are released each week following the live broadcast, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the alerts icon to make sure you don't miss an episode. You can also tell your friends about the episode if you enjoyed it, or if you feel like it might be useful for somebody in your practice or a colleague. Today, we have Alan Tittle with us to talk about medical malpractice discovery. This is very timely for me, so selfishly, I am excited about it because I happen to be a med mal referring attorney right now, and I have handled a grand total of 2 medical malpractice cases in my career, one of which is the one I'm handling right now. So, yes, this is going to be very interesting, and while it may sound dry, I promise you we will make it very, very fun. So I am excited to hear about Alan's tips on these things called chemtrails, audit trails, whatever they are, and how to drill down on the tricks that the defense tries to use to cover up changes in electronic medical records, how to maximize getting the true facts that we need in order to prove our case and bring justice to our clients. So we're going to put Alan's contact information in the description below, as usual. You can reach out to him with any questions after this episode. Alan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us about audit trails and truth.
All right. Thank you, Jenna. And I mean, look, the audit trail is like the big brother of these med mal cases. It can give us the who, the what, the when, the where, and the how. And so they're really vital to get the real story out there. So, Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. Same deal here with the audit trail. And so they've really become a vital part of my case, workup of the case. And also, and I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but with the electronic medical record itself, there's more out there than just the audit trail. And so, I mean, look, they're never going to hand it over to you. It's always going to be a fight, but it's something you always want to fight for because it's worth the fight.
Absolutely. So tell us, what do we do? I mean, how do we know? This is one of my biggest questions. How do we know that what they're giving us is not the full story? And when, I mean, do you do this in every single case? Is this like a method, a bullet point outline you do in every case, or is it when you get triggered because there's XYZ missing? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this is something we do in every case as we get the audit trail. And look, the Code of Federal Regulations mandates that electronic medical records have audit trails. And so this dates back to, remember Obamacare and like the 2009 time period. I hope that's the right year. As part of those laws, they created a mandatory law to have electronic medical records. So that is where we've started to switch, well, a lot of places did it already, from the handwritten medical records to the EMR world. And so anytime you got, a case that, is after 2009, there's got to be something there. And so, we request it in every case. And as the Keenan Edge sort of theory teaches us, one of the most important thing in a med mal case certainly is your timeline, right? Mm-hmm. Your timeline's always evolving. Well, this becomes part of that. And so, as part of the audit trail, this is the only way to try to match up and figure out the true story of the case. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to tell a story of what happened. And, the defense, they want to make this complicated and we don't know what happened and, this, that, and the other thing. Well, this is part of our job to help simplify it. This is objective. This is objective. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the only thing that they can do is sit up there and say, well, this computer system's wrong. Well, good luck with that. And so, again, this is something we request in every case. Now, I've had to learn the lessons of the audit trail the hard way, meaning, I'm no audit trail guru. In every case, I now actually bring in an audit trail expert to work with me because I think it is so vital. Because I'm a lawyer. I'm not a computer whiz. So I have these folks help work up the case alongside me. And what I've learned is lesson number one is audit trails ultimately are customizable, meaning you get what you ask for. And there's so many different parameters of what you can ask for. It's incredible. But at the very least, there is a minimum set in my written discovery and sort of categories that I ask for. So, things such as date and time of the access event, what activity, the duration of access, obviously your unique patient identifier, the types of action, meaning did they create, did they view, did they add something, did they delete something, all these things. And then you want it in an Excel spreadsheet. So sometimes these defense lawyers will give you a PDF. No, you don't want a PDF. You do not want a PDF because the way it comes out of the computer system is an actual Excel spreadsheet. And so then you're getting the original. And here's another good point of why you want an Excel. If you got a hospitalization that, maybe lasted a week or maybe just a couple of days, it's still going to be, hundreds of pages of long, this audit trail, if not thousands. You want to be able to organize it by the columns. So the other, trick, and there are ways to unlock it. They'll give you a locked Excel. Well, that's essentially the same as a PDF. So you want to get it in an unlocked Excel fashion, if that makes sense.
Okay. And do you request it that way, or do you request it in native format, or both?
I say native, and then I put, Excel, in parentheses, because I make sure that they know what I need. So I think the other thing is you want to be as specific as possible in these requests, I mean, with your parameters. So once you figure out what you want in your customizable audit trail, ask for it, and then make sure you get it. Because what I've come to learn is a lot of these defense lawyers, they don't know much about this stuff either.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, at first I was thinking, they're just on purpose. They're trying to mess this up. And maybe there's a few out there. But I also think the most important thing is they don't know much about this stuff either. Mm-hmm. And so you got to spoon feed it. And sometimes it even takes a phone call. You pick up the phone and say, hey, do you know what I'm really asking for? I'm like, no, I don't. I put this, and this in here. What that means is that, oh, now I get it. And so, sometimes it just takes actually being a human being instead of, lawyer man or lawyer woman. Like, you got to be human sometimes.
Yeah, and this goes for in so many different scenarios too. I feel like in not just in the med-mal audit trail scenario, but if you sense that there's some kind of, you're like, I don't know, something is not right. I know a lot of lawyers will just dig in and be like, continue to send follow-up emails. Sometimes it's just really a miscommunication, it really sometimes is. I've found picking up the phone can be very helpful and to move things along, right? And whose best interest is that in? Your clients. So do that. Good advice.
Absolutely. But, these audit trails, they can be used in a variety of situations. And I'm happy to sort of give some case examples if that would be helpful.
Before we move on, so I don't know if we hit this in the beginning, but let's just give a quick example of what an audit trail, just for like super basic, if people don't do medical malpractice or haven't heard of it, like what, and this may sound regressive, so sorry audience, but what is it's when they change stuff in there, then it's tracked, it's when they delete, what is it?
Anything, think of it this way. It's like, like track changes, right? So anytime anyone does anything in the EMR, electronic medical record, it's there's an audit trail behind it. And so we're talking how long you viewed a specific order. How long do you, so say you have a case relating to test results. Well, how long do they look at the test results? Or maybe you have a case involving, say it's an allergic reaction case. So, a patient of yours, your client gets medication they're allergic to, and they go to anaphylactic shock and die or have a brain injury, lack of oxygen. Well, did they look at the medical history? And if they looked at it, how long did they look at it? Or, prescription error case. So, the examples can go, on and on. But the littlest things, this audit trail will keep track of. And here's another thing that, in terms of the audit trail that I didn't really realize until recently. If someone starts a note, doesn't finish it, the audit trail keeps track of that. They keep track of all these little things as long as you ask for. So remember, you get what you ask for. And so that's why I think it's important to work with these experts who really understand what to ask for and see things that, the average Joe or, a lawyer like me who's not very smart can miss.
So will your audit trail expert, well, let me see. Do you just request medical records at first and then have them look at it and have them help you shape the additional request of the audit trail information?
Yes. So, we get medical records, we work up the case the normal way we do. And then as we're coming up with our, request for production of documents, each type of electronic medical record. So say it's Epic, or say you have all scripts, you should have a specific EMR specific request related to that specific type of electronic medical record. And so that's, to me, that's sort of why it's important to have an expert to help you do this. And the audit trail, I just want to make clear, the audit trail isn't only specific to just the electronic chart. So what do I mean by that? Pick six, the pharmacy thing that you get.
What?
It has its own. Yeah,
Isn't that a football term?
Yes, that pick six, but this is pick sis. So, PYXIS.
Okay. Okay.
It's sort of how you get, the pharmacy specific EMR has its own audit trail.
Okay. Okay.
And then specific monitors, if you get them quick enough. So cardiac monitors, pulse ox, they could have fetal heart tracing. They could have their own audit trail. And so that's why anytime, as soon as I get a case now, we send out preservation letters. Okay. Because we want to preserve any electronic data that we can get that may be relevant to the case. Because a lot of the monitors itself, the pulse ox, the card, all that stuff, it's super time sensitive. And a lot of times, it's just too late. At least that's what they claim. But it's important to get the preservation letters out there as soon as possible to maintain that stuff.
Okay. Will your audit expert help you verify if they say it's too late?
100%. And so let me give an example. Within every EMR, and this is a little outside the audit trail, there's direct messaging. So I have a case right now involving something called Perfect Serve. That's within Epic. There's in-basket messages. There's all these different messaging platforms within the electronic medical record. And undoubtedly, you'll get in a lit and they say, it's destroyed after 60 days and automatically deletes or whatever. You got to fight that fight. But here's the deal. Even within the audit trail, even if something gets deleted, the audit trail shows if they looked at a message, if they typed a message.
Okay. And so the message itself might have be gone, like the actual text of it. Okay.
That's right. But if you get that preservation letter out early, they maintain the messages. So I have a case right now where I have a perfect serve message that is really a key to the case. And the only way that I think that I got that is because I sent a preservation letter out as soon as I signed up the case that said, hey, save these messages. And I'm just like in my request for production of documents, I'm pretty specific in my preservation letters. I don't say, preserve all evidence. Get specific with it. And I think your expert can help you do that too.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So weaving back, we're doing the weave. We go back and tell us about some cases and some instances where you've used this and it's been helpful, or maybe where it came up bunk.
Yeah. So, again, we do this in every case. And, I was trying to think, obviously I knew it was what we're going to talk about before we came on here. Yeah. So I was trying to think of some good examples of using the audit trail in a case. And so I had, a few years ago, we had a case, it was a postpartum hemorrhage case. And so what that means is, after delivery, sometimes, delivering mothers bleed a lot. And, the Keenan Edge teaches us, we got to do a timeline, right? And to be honest, I struggled with the whole process in the beginning because I was so focused on just what's in the records, but you forget to get the timeline from your client's perspective too. And so, I'm looking through these records and, my client is telling me, the husband was like, during this time period, the way we discovered there was all this blood was I lifted the, sort of the sheet, and I just saw blood all over the floor and no one was around. I couldn't get anyone's attention. It was a whole big deal. And, I looked at the chart and I'm like, yeah, this doesn't really vibe. I don't understand it. And then I got the audit trail. And it showed that basically this, that the vitals, that were being put into the medical record in real time were these vitals that showed that she was in shock, that she was losing blood, that the blood pressure was so low that, blood supply to vital organs were getting cut, the blood wasn't getting to the vital organs. And so we were able to sort of reverse engineer the timeline based on what the husband said and what the audit trail said, not really with what the medical record said. And then when confronted with that in depositions, the medical providers kind of caved, said, yeah, actually I was out of the room at this time. And I thought this person was handling it, and I found out they weren't. And we were able to sort of figure out that a significant time period had went by where this mother was bleeding out. And this is a case where, what ended up happening was she went into shock and lost her kidneys. And so she had to be on dialysis. And this was the first time she ever, delivered. And it was a big deal. And so that was one really good example. Another good example is, I had a prescription error case. And, this goes to sort of the system failure that can occur in these hospitals is, these nurses get all these patients, right? And, they're zooming along and, they're doing the best they can. They see, pharmacy dropped off some medications that's in the little, I don't know, a little mailbox that's sometimes outside the doors. They put it in and, here, let's give it to the patient. Well, what we discovered was that the medication was 12 hours early. And I don't know why it was delivered 12 hours early, but it was. The nurse didn't look at the orders ahead of time and just gave it to the patient. Now, that stuff happens. And the only way that you can sort of figure that out sometimes is looking at the audit trail. And because, sometimes we know how things happen or the order of things, but we don't know the why. Like, all right, why did this nurse do that? Well, because he didn't look at the orders. So, I can go on and on with examples, and I'm sure other examples will come up as we talk. But I think those are sort of two really good examples that really hit home of what the audit trail itself can help you with.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think a lot of us trust the medical record, not trust them, and we know there are errors in them and we know that sort of thing. But I don't know. I guess even up until now, as mistrusting as I am of what's in the medical records, I don't really think too much about whether or not they put the correct time in or the correct order of events or whatever. But it's funny because my parents are in the medical field, physical and occupational therapy, and they would do their notes later in the day or maybe even the next day, because, if they're seeing patients rapid fire. And so they're remembering what happened to the best of their ability and as honestly as possible, but they're human. And so I'm wondering, is it right? Am I right in understanding that kind of the doctors are creating the notes to the best of their ability, maybe nefariously sometimes, I don't know. But the audit trail is kind of the check and balance kind of as to the accuracy of those notes. Like, it will tell you if there's anything wonky about them.
Yes and no. So, the audit trail is objective, meaning it tells you exactly what you should know, but there's more to it. So let's talk about physician notes for a second. Mm-hmm. So I just had a failure to diagnose a meningitis case from the ER of a 10-year-old kid. And in that case, I noticed there was the dates of the physician note was like 2 days. It was 2 or 3 days after the fact, after the care occurred. And that just didn't make any sense to me. Mm-hmm. And so what I figured out is, based on the audit trail, it looked like, he was in his note, but how did that? He's in his note before the note says it occurred. Like, I don't understand. Yeah. And so what I did in that circumstance is you ask for all note versions and all note histories.
Okay.
So that's something outside of the audit trail that I now ask for in every case, is for the keynotes. You want to ask for all note versions and all note histories related to this. And what I ended up finding out was there was multiple versions of the note. And as this kid was declining and dying in the hospital, this doctor was in his chart, even though he was no longer his doctor. And he was tweaking his note based on, what was going on with the kid. And so those are things that obviously blow up your case. And while we all love to try cases, it is certainly nice to occasionally settle a case for a fair amount of money, for full justice, without trying it. And those are the types of things that will make the defense lawyers and defense side run the other direction. Okay.
All right. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you can not have your client go through the stress of trial, that's incredible. All right.
Absolutely.
What else?
Well, I think in terms of this EMR world, first of all, there's so much to it that it's crazy. But one thing that I've recently learned about that is really got me up at night. Really two things. Number one, templated notes within the electronic medical record. So what do I mean?
Oh, like the copy paste type stuff?
Yeah, it's auto-populated.
Yeah. Auto-populated, yeah.
So, in that meningitis case, sometimes I charge a rhino, and I wish I would have done a little more work before the depo in terms of sometimes I learn something each deposition. So I'm taking the deposition of a care provider in that case. And it dawned on me, things weren't jiving. So I had the audit trail and, I had the note versions, but we've all seen this. There's stuff in the medical record that just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Like, how can the patient be, alert times 3 when, half of his brain is hanging off the bed? It's like, you see things like that all the time. And so in the deposition, I'm like, all right, let me go through this note and just ask, is this part of the templated note or is this added by you? And so I went through and I said, is this part of the template or did you add this? No, that's part of the template. Okay. And so that doesn't jive with what you put here, right? Right. So the reality is what you wrote in this portion of the note, that's really what's going on with the patient. You can't rely on this part. Is that correct? Yes. And I went through painstakingly through that note with that provider to figure that out. Now, what I've come to find as I try to improve every day is, we can get these templates. We can get these templates beforehand. And so, if you have a, surgery case, right? So right now I have a colonoscopy case. I'm fighting right now to get the templated op report relating to a colonoscopy. So let's see how much this doc actually changed in the op report versus the template. Because ultimately, every single op report that I've ever seen for every medical malpractice case, minus 1%, you read the op report and it's like business as usual. Nothing bad happened. Everything's great. Well,
meanwhile, the patient's dead.
Right. Because that's just the template. That's just the template. So, it's like this electronic medical record system, I think, if we would look back and, 2009 time period, we thought, oh, this electronic medical record, it will make medical records more reliable. I don't know if that's the case because we have these templates now to save time. It's part of the business. Here's the thing that is really keeping me up at that is electronic medical records now have smart text and smart lists. Okay. Two different things. So how when you're writing a text message now, the text will finish the sentence for you.
Yep.
EMR has that now too. And here's the other thing.
And wait, but is it based on kind of how they've done things in the past? Because isn't Google is super creepy where when I'm typing an email, it kind of knows I'm a lawyer and the things that I'm talking about. And so it will, or other emails I've sent and it will choose from them.
Yes, but let me give a specific example. So say someone, you have an ER situation and say, let's talk about my meningitis case for a second. He was misdiagnosed for a viral infection. Well, in the smart list now, if a medical provider puts in diagnosis viral infection, then an automated list of symptoms comes up within the electronic medical record that you can select from. And so that's really scary because, think about it. In these failure to diagnose or misdiagnosis cases, these providers now, once they make the diagnosis, the EMR tells them what symptoms the patient should be having. So how can we rely on these things? Is
it ever the other way around where they choose the symptoms and the system tells them the diagnosis, or is that not?
There's certainly part of that. Which gets me to something totally different called best practice advisories. And so BPAs, these are like clinical alerts. And so say you have symptoms of sepsis and, there's a sepsis logarithm and this person, they got their pulse rate's high and, their blood pressure is messed up and they got, this symptom and their respiratory rate is really fast. Well, within the electronic medical record system, look at an alert, a clinical alert. And a lot of times it's called, at least in Epic, it's called best practice advisory, or BPA. And, you go to the hospital, you got all these beepings, right? You got the beep, 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 and the nurse runs in and you hit silent and 5 minutes later, the pulse, the little finger thing, it comes off. Oh, it's fine. They put it back on. Look, there's so many alerts in the medical records right now. It's the same deal. And so what's special about these BPAs, these best practice advisories? Number one, you should be getting them. All right. You should be asking for all best practice advisories that apply to your patient. But these are clinical pathways a lot of times, clinical alerts. And the only way that a patient can, that a nurse or a doctor or whoever can treat the patient is they have to comply with it or they hit dismiss, meaning they have to physically dismiss the best practice advisory before moving on. So, say you have a failure to diagnose a sepsis case. Mm-hmm. They have all the signs and symptoms of sepsis, right there in front of them. They got a best practice advisory, big red alarm going off. This is sepsis alert. Well, they could just hit mute, dismiss it, send the patient home. Now, imagine if you had that, that information in front of a jury. It's not going to go very well. I
can imagine they would want that one to go. Mm-mm.
Yeah, and so that happens. And these BPAs, they happen not just for big stuff like sepsis, but discharge planning, informed consent. They'll have a BPA for, telling them to stop smoking. All these little things are built in, but the big things are in there too. And so that is another area that I think is really vital to get is these best practice advisories or the clinical alerts that apply to your patient. Because it could blow your case wide open.
Wow. And is this, two questions on that. Number one, are these program specific? So some have them and some don't. And number two, which I think you can answer in the same way, same question, same response. Are these mostly found in big hospital situations, or how about smaller clinics or plastic surgery centers or anything, other clinics like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the majority of the time, these BPAs are going to be in the hospital systems, no doubt about it. But every EMR system could have them. And so if you're in a hospital system and they have Epic, they have them. I can guarantee that. And, I don't know how many, what percent of hospital systems use Epic, but my guess is it's pretty darn high.
Probably a lot, one I've heard of.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the one I'm most familiar with because all the major hospital systems use Epic, here in Cleveland, Ohio. But, there's others have their own type of clinical alerts, whether it be all scripts or whatever. Mm-hmm. But think about this. If you have a hospital system that, they have whatever EMR system, and they don't have best practice advisories, they don't have clinical alerts, how do you think that looks?
Can use that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I always think about it both ways. Like, if they have them, great, let's get them. Mm-hmm. And if they say they don't have them, well, why not? The hospital down the street does. Mm-hmm. How are you providing, the care that you need to provide to your patients when you're not even doing what the hospital system is doing, 20 miles away? So just another way to look at it.
Do you find a difference in ambulatory surgical centers versus hospitals and what they use and their resources? Is there any sort of pattern you've noticed, or is it just kind of some ambulatory surgical centers that are smaller have the big programs and some don't?
I think a lot of them makes it's determined if it's associated with the hospital system, right? Mm. So if it's, a same day surgery center for, some big hospital, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, whatever, they have it, because they're intertwined with the hospital system as a whole. But if it's a standalone facility, they're going to have less just because, ultimately, whatever, standalone orthopedic, physician-owned surgery center is going to have less systems than the Cleveland Clinic. It's just the nature of the beast. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have the big ones. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that, they shouldn't have something that covers discharge criteria relating to whatever. So if it's a standalone ambulatory center that does colonoscopies, does that mean, do they have a policy that says what the discharge criteria is? And can someone be discharged home with 10 out of 10 pain, in the gut? They should. And if not, isn't that your system failure? So there's a whole different way to look at it depending on what they have or don't have.
Are there standards for electronic medical records, like what you're supposed to use and what you're supposed to have from any of like the letter certification agencies for any of these places?
Yes, there are. So one thing, and I would look at, and I even wrote this down so I don't screw it up.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I jumped ahead.
The ASTM E2147-18. And that's the American.
Okay.
I know. So the American Society for Testing and Materials, it's this, regulatory agency. And by the way, federal law has incorporated this standard. Sort of give the standards for the audit trails, what minimum audit data they must collect as part of the audit trail. And I think that standard is actually really important for fighting the defense when they don't want to give it to you. So, one thing that I ultimately always come up is, it's privilege.
Oh, God.
Serious. First of all, two things. Number one, the Federal Code of Regulations says specifically that the patient has a right to this. This is their audit trail. This is their information. It's not the hospitals, it's the patients. So that's number one. Number two, that code section we just talked about specifically states that this isn't privileged. This isn't privileged information. So, you're always going to get it. There's not a case where, they don't raise that. But, that's a battle that you're always going to have.
Okay.
You're always going to have.
All right. That makes sense. Okay. What else? What next?
So the other thing that keeps me up at night is these electronic medical records. There's so much that us lawyers don't understand that, my understanding is only the tip of the iceberg. So there's something in Epic called the playground. What is the Epic playground? The Epic playground is basically like a training system for folks to learn Epic, right? And you can also use that as part of your discovery. So in other words, what folks see, what the medical providers see, the nurses see, is totally different from what we're getting from the printout version. And so like, if you're trying to tell a story of what the medical providers see, like those best practice advisories, those clinical alerts, like, it's big red flashing things on the computer screen. It's just not an alert. So like, we need to be able to visualize this stuff. And I think, this Epic's Playground is one tool that I'm trying to figure out. I haven't really figured out the best way to utilize it in discovery, but I'm working on it and I'll report back.
All right. We're going to have another episode.
That's right. But, that's an area that I think is not many lawyers are touching yet. And it's something that I want to sort of really get into and dive into. And that goes to what, that way the smart text, the list, all these different things we can really start learning about.
So the playground, it gives you a more visual of what they were seeing. So that, I imagine, Edge has a whole course on seeing is believing. Dawn is always talking about how written word is what? Written word goes away. Written word is here to stay. The spoken word flies away. I'm sorry, Dawn, I totally butchered that. But what you're seeing, so if you're seeing what they're seeing, that I imagine would be incredibly impactful for a jury.
Absolutely. So, I took a deposition last week of a nurse. And she kept saying, well, I put this in, and I forget what she called it, this section of the medical record. And I looked at my chart. I don't got that section. I looked at defense lawyers and I'm like, I don't got that. You guys got that section? No. I'm like, you guys knew it existed? No. And so now the deposition's open. We're going to have to come back because there's a whole section of the chart that my expert didn't tell me to get. That no one knew it existed. But like, those are the things that you're constantly discovering. Mm-hmm. And so, that has now become a super important part of my deposition, is going through sort of the aspects of this electronic medical record, because I want to be able to visualize what we got going on here. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to know what they're seeing. I want to be able to know what this giant alert says that pops up on their screen that they hit mute on for 50 times and they finally hit dismiss. Like, that's how we tell our story. Mm-hmm. And so, you really got to take the time in your depositions to really flesh that out.
Okay. Well, yeah, that'll be super cool. I mean, keep working on that. And of course, in the RA group, keep us posted. And I can't wait to have you back on and talk about that and how to get it in the first place. And I know that Epic has one, but maybe if find out that other programs do, and how, focus groups respond to that. And because like you said, it's a really interesting and strange concept, this electronic medical records, because there are so many layers, and you can go so deep into it that it's almost impossible to know everything about every system. And it would be interesting to know if someday they try to standardize it or something like that, because I think that would be to the patient's benefit. But who knows?
Absolutely. And the best is when you get this information, and this just happened to me, and they try to, well, this must be wrong. This time on this perfect serve message, mm-hmm. It's wrong. Mm-hmm. And you just look at, you look at the person you're in deposition with or you're at trial with, and you say, well, what do you mean it's wrong? I didn't make it up, mm-hmm. So, and like, just credibility. Trials are about credibility, right? Mm-hmm. At its core, who's telling the truth? That's the way you really make sure that one side is telling truth and the other side isn't. Is just there's objective things that both sides agree that it is what it is, and then you got the person on the stand saying, "Well, this is wrong," and essentially coming up with a conspiracy theory, mm-hmm. that their own lawyers came up with. So, all that stuff is good stuff. But look, let me warn people. You're never just going to get this stuff, right? Like, I don't know. Have you ever had Jenna, have you ever had a case where the defense just gives you everything because you asked for it really nicely?
No, but the nicest way I've been rejected is by, we just need another 30 days. We just need another, and then I'm like 6 months down the road before I realize they're just not giving it to me. So, right. No, right. I don't.
And look, this audit trail stuff, it's becoming more and more common to turn mm-hmm. over. I know, not in Ohio, but I've heard that, like, in Cook County in Illinois, it's like mandatory disclosure in malpractice case. I don't know if that's true. Someone told me that, but it sounds really good. Yeah. I know here in Ohio, portions are given it to me regularly and the portions are not. So, I have a case right now where I've been told that they're not going to give me any audit trail. All right, well, we'll fight that fight. The vast majority of the cases rule that the audit trail should be turned over. But I always try to build the case for the reason why. And so, number one, if I'm in the fight, I always cite the federal code section that says this belongs to the patient. But then in, the early depositions, if they have not given it to me and they're refusing to give it to me, I try to set up an early deposition to explain the need for it. And so, like in that particular case where they're saying the perfect serve message time is wrong and things are wrong within the medical record. Oh, well, there's one way to find out. Let's get the audit trail, right? And so, these things don't lie. And, now I got a reason. I got the law. I got a reason. I'm ready to file my motion. Because what we don't want is, we don't want it as a whole to have a couple more decisions out there that say we can't get it for whatever reason.
Right. So who do you choose to be that sacrificial lamb? I'm thinking because it's like, do you then not get to depose them again? And so you kind of shot your shot, or what do you think?
Yeah, generally. Now, there's an argument, obviously, to keep it open because we didn't have all the information despite asking for it. But, I try to work my way up the totem pole. So generally, like say it's a hospital case, I'm picking a nurse or, an aide or someone sort of, at low level that, number one, may not be as sophisticated as some type of brain surgeon who knows how to, wiggle out of an answer. I feel like I can get the truth a lot of times better from the average Joe. So that's who I like to start with and sort of work my way out.
Have you ever had a judge rule that you don't need it? Why do you need it? You have the medical records, kind of a thing.
No. And the reason for that is because I try to make the case of why I need it before I go to the court. So, I would say if you were to ask me, I don't know, 10 years ago, what my approach would be, I'd be like, I'm charging ahead. And, I'm like a rhino and, the code of federal regulations say this is my client's, therefore I get it. I've learned, and as I've lost my hair, to sort of take a step back and be like, all right, let's analyze this a little bit and really slow down a bit and make the case for why. And so even though legally we shouldn't need the why, it's my position, an audit trail should be turned over when you request the medical records. That's my position. But that doesn't mean a judge is going to buy that. It's just these judges, there's some judges out there that, you got to go the extra mile to make sure that all your T's are crossed and all your I's are dotted. Because if you're bringing a discovery dispute to their courtroom, it better be a big deal. And so I make sure it's a big deal before I get there.
That's really good advice. And it can be applicable to all cases as well. I've found that judges are asking more often, why do you need this? Why, whether it's a cause of action or, whether I want to depose the corporate entity in an admitted liability case in a car crash against a truck company, whatever it may be, judges are like, well, why do you need to do it? And even though I try my best to always think about the why of why I'm doing something, in those situations, I just want to say, Your Honor, because the law says I can, and the law says so, but it's oftentimes not enough. So it's fantastic to hear that you kind of try to set this up so that there's either, some way you need to check a fact or impeach a statement or, a reason that why you need to get in there that a judge is going to say, okay, I really can't argue this. I don't find it to be superfluous or, harassing to the defense or whatever.
Right. And sort of that goes hand in hand with that. The other thing that I've started doing now is requesting inspections of my clients' medical records on the computer, on the EMR. Okay. And so the Cures Act gives patients direct access to their health information. It's their right? And or their patient representative. And so I got a lot of pushback on that. Well, we can't do that. You'd be able to see other medical providers' charts. And, I got every excuse under the sun. So this is how I fix it. And I didn't think of this until recently. And it's sort of so dumb. It's so simple that I can't believe I didn't think of it. Now in depositions, you always ask, well, in preparation of today's deposition, what documents did you review, right? Take it a step further. How did you review those documents? In what format? What are they going to say? And I said, well, I looked at them on the computer. Oh, so you accessed my clients through your lawyer, my client's chart on the computer. Yeah. Could you see anyone else's? Well, no, couldn't see anyone else's. I just saw this patient. Oh, is it easy to do? Oh yeah, we just jump on my computer and I can be there within 5 seconds. Oh, great. And so all the excuses in terms of why they can't let you see your own patient's electronic chart on their computer is out the door because they just did it. And so they can't argue that to the court that, it's unduly burdensome, or they're going to see other patients' information, or I can't do it. I've had people say, "Oh, I can't do it," and then you prepped your client by doing it. It doesn't make any sense. And so, I think that's a really simple way, because what I have found is that when doing these inspections, and I like to do them, via Zoom, and you just, it's a 30B, click this. What's this do? What's this say? What if you do that? It's just simply, you're just going through the record and seeing what they see at the time. And if you're able to do that, and then I like to take screenshots, okay, let's take a screenshot here and, mark this as an exhibit.
So are you doing this on a Zoom dep? Or are you in person?
I like to, yeah, some people do it in person. I like to do it on a Zoom. Sometimes you get into, arguing, disagreement about doing the screenshots. That's my current battle. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, it's your patient's chart. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's your client's stuff. So why not? Explain to the judge why I can't take a screenshot of my client's own medical records and how they look at the chart.
I would also argue, and I don't know if this is a perfect argument, but I'd argue that whatever you bring to the deposition, you're supposed to hand over. So if I have my client make a list of, I don't know, things to remember or whatever, I'm always telling them there's a chance they ask you to hand it over. So you're like, well, we're talking about it. You're looking at it, testifying about it. You should have to hand it over to me. And the way we do that is a screenshot or whatever.
Right. And then, it upsets me so much. You create this depot notice, and, you ask for all this stuff, right? Like everything reviewed, and, bring the chart so you don't have to go through it. They never bring anything. And it's so it's just such a hassle. Well, why did you bring the chart? Oh, because I just read it on the computer here. Mm-hmm. It's the same deal. It's the same deal. And then if they go to the court saying you can't do it, well, you just did it for your own client.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very cool. Let's see. What else? Let's see. Audit trail does not. Oh, what if they tell you the audit trail does not exist? The audit trail does not exist. Isn't that from Mean Girls? What did they say?
Right. I've had that happen. And here's the deal. The federal regulations mandate that they keep the audit trail for 6 years. That be the rule. Mm-hmm. And so there's no way, no how that they don't have an audit trail. But I will give one word of caution is, for nursing home lawyers, point and click care it's a little different. And it's far more difficult. And there's been a lot of back and forth on this stuff. So it's my understanding Point Click Care is like a Canadian company. And it's, people have tried to bottom line is you can get audit data. And it's my experience, at least with Point Click Care, there's a couple key things. So number one, when you're getting the chart in Point Click Care, you should be getting, it's like a cover sheet that has hyperlinks. And so that's really important because you just don't want like a photocopy of the cover sheet. You want the actual cover sheet because that way you're getting the full Point Click Care chart. And the other thing is Point Click Care can do note histories very easily. So like the note versions and the note histories, you got to get that stuff for the notes that are really key, and you can get it. They can get that stuff, but when in doubt, and I've had to do this on a case, a non-epic case. You take a 30B relating to their EMR, electronic medical record,
and
you figure out everything that you got to figure out. All the stuff that defense lawyer just doesn't understand. Well, you get it from their IT person. And just walk painstakingly through. All right, so CMS comes in and tells you that you must turn over the audit data. What do you do? You go to this and click that. Okay. And how do I change the parameters of what audit data I'm getting? Well, you click with it, and you walk through it. It's an extra step, but sometimes you got to do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So it does exist. Bottom line, this is a great edge teaching point. Be the woodpecker, right? Figure out how you got to ask for something, and go get it.
100%.
All right. What if you feel like the EMR or audit trail itself is altered? Can they do that? Can they alter the ghost track?
Remember, you're getting it in an Excel spreadsheet, right? Yeah. So, I guess theoretically, but I think it's, number one, that's why you got to have an expert. So that's where I rely on that expert to go through this stuff and tell me, is it there or not? Mm-hmm. And you really want someone that is hyper focused on that specific EMR. Now, there are experts that I found recently, like the guy I use now is phenomenal. And, he sort of has an expert for each type of EMR within his wheelhouse. So he's got a group of 5 or 6, and, this person's the Epic person, this person's the Allscripts person, this person is the point-click care person. And it's important to have someone that really is hyper-focused, because each one of these electronic medical record system is their own world. Mm-hmm. And it's I know for me, at times I feel overwhelmed by it. But that's why you got to, rely on others to do and provide the knowledge that you don't have.
That was actually my next question, and one of our last as we try to wrap up a little bit here. But what about those of us who are in small firms or we're solos? It just sounds like we're asking for so much information, and how am I going to parse through all of that? And I know part of it is get your expert to do it, but at the end of the day, at least in my case, I feel like I need to be the one having looked at it so that I can be the one, who's the buck stops here when it comes to my client.
Yeah. So I guess I have 2 or 3 responses. Number one, I would still tell you, at least in one big case, get that expert to teach you how to do it. Mm-hmm. And, force them to jump on Zoom and explain all this stuff so that next time you can do it. Number 2, I think this is why it's important to have an Excel. You can, if you have some Excel savviness, you can really cut to the point of what you want to see through, whether you're organizing by this category or what have you. And number 3, I think it's important to utilize the lawyers around you, right? Mm. So, I know like here locally here in Cleveland, there's like 3 or 4 of us that are constantly talking about electronic discovery, EMRs. Mm. Like, oh, what did you find out? You did a 30B? Oh, great. Give me the transcript. So let me read, let me learn. And we're constantly going back and forth in terms of, figuring out the best route to how to get certain stuff. And so, I think it's a combination of all those things, but most importantly, Google. So, like I did this before I came on. I was trying to get an example of this smart text, the list. Mm-hmm. And, I think I just literally Googled Epic smart text, and a manual from Epic came up. So, like that stuff is out there. The other thing is you can ask for the manuals of these EMR systems in Discovery. Mm-hmm. Obviously it's going to take a little time for you to go through that manual and try to figure it out. But if you just can't afford an expert for that particular case, that's another avenue that, you can go and get in addition to the 30B deposition. So like between the manual and the 30B deposition, perhaps you can try to figure this thing out. I know I've gotten audit trail information in the past. I look at it and I'm like, I look at it for about 30 seconds and I'm like overwhelmed. I'm like, get this away from me. I don't know what's going on. But I think it's also important to sort of think about what time period is important, right? So like, it's organized by time. And it's, if you're really focused on that one particular day, look on that. But I would say it's important to look at the information after the fact. So in that meningitis case, I think, the provider who was at fault was in the record a total of like 20 times the day of the ER visit. But then a week after the fact, on one day alone, he was in the chart over 100 times after the kid died. Why is he in there? Why is he in there? And so then I asked him, this was like 3 weeks after the fact. Like, well, why were you in the chart? And he wasn't prepared for that at all. And, he said something like, well, when a person returns to, the ER, and for the same reasons, I like to do my own quality review. Your own quality review. Like, what are you talking about? You got your own quality review, little committee of, just you? No. And so you get into that and then you figure out, all right, what's he doing in there? And it's a whole can of worms that makes things look really bad, especially if you compare it to what they did during the time period. And so, if in that same meningitis case, this is a case where, he was diagnosed. The kid had all the symptoms of sepsis, did trigger the sepsis alert. No one caught it. No one looked at it. And this doctor forgot to diagnose him with a viral condition and then left without discharging, forgot to discharge him. And then another doctor came 2 hours after the fact and just put the discharge order in. And if you look, like no one looked at any of the vitals that showed that, he had this sepsis alert. So all the, these things that you can discover are really, really mind-blowing.
Do you find, last question, then we have a question from the audience. I always say last question, I could just go on and on. Do you find that you are set apart from other medical malpractice plaintiffs lawyers by virtue of the fact that you know what to request and to request this? I know you're saying that it's more often requested these days, but I feel like it kind of bumps up the value of your case a little bit just by asking for this and fighting to kind of get it.
I would say that actually using it set me apart opposed to most. And the beauty of it is these defense lawyers don't know how to, they're not prepping their people on it because they don't understand it themselves. I shouldn't say some do, but I would say, 50% of them aren't going to be prepped on what's in the audit trail. And so that's fertile ground where you can get real life reaction without the coaching.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Jim Dorr asks, is there a referral for an EMR expert? Are you willing to share?
I'm happy to share, but contact me off list and, I'm happy to give you a couple names.
All right, Jim, we'll put his contact information in the description box below. So make sure to check for that. Also, if you have Populi, you can pop in there and grab Alan's email. All right, Alan, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate you having me. And I think you just got to keep being a woodpecker. When I say, I'm not giving it to you, keep woodpecking away.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you to all of you who joined us live for this week's episode of Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge. And thank you, Alan, for being here to teach us so much about this super interesting element of discovery. If you liked today's episode, please click that thumbs up to feed the YouTube algorithm. Let the powers that be know that you find the information useful. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up for alerts so you don't miss an episode. We have some replays and some pre-recorded episodes coming up. So if you missed anything in the past, you can check out what's coming up. But we will be back with a live guest in the next few weeks. I have been setting up a few different things. So don't forget to send suggestions on topics and speakers. I love getting help from the audience to find out what you want to know about, because I love to give you what you want from this podcast. So have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and I will see you next time.